Hey everybody, welcome to Houdini Hangout. It is June 26th. Welcome to the stream. My name's Peter. I host this here stream. And anybody see any interesting videos today? Hello. Hey Zach, how's it going, man? Welcome. Anybody see anything interesting or anything worth chatting about? Today was the Keynote presentation premiere for Houdini 20.5 from Paris. I might have seen something. Exactly. Sorry, I just need to mute that. There we go. There was a little something, a little, 2 hours, 15-minute presentation. It's pretty crazy. Definitely a long one. One of the really funny details about this presentation was that it was on a boat in Paris, which is wild to think about. I don't really know how that came about, but yeah, exactly. Lord of the Rings length announcement, exactly. But so my couple folks from the education team were there. I obviously was not there because not obviously, but I was not there. I guess I could have gotten back home since then, but I was not at the launch this year, but we had a couple folks from the education team there, and they were saying that it was really weird to be in this, what seemed like a theater, and then every so often you'd get a little bob from like a passing boat or something like that, because they're on the Seine, I guess. So it's kind of just a funny thing to think about while this was all happening. I think at one point Rob goes, "Does anybody realize anybody noticing we're on a boat or anything like that?" Because I think every so often some of the stuff. Hey Enki, welcome. Every so often everything would kind of shift and move. But yeah, here we are. We're looking at Houdini 20.5. Yes. So yeah, tonight we're gonna mainly be talking about the new features of 20.5. Don't get thinking that we're going to be opening up Houdini 20.5 right now and looking at it. It is still technically not public, so that's off limits, but we can chat about what we saw and we can talk about it, get some ideas for just sort of what the new features are, what's happening, and sort of maybe some of the other little questions you might have surrounding it. Yeah, I mean, there is this little confidential thing in the beta still, so you can't just go showing it around everywhere, you get in trouble. But yeah, honestly, there's not much, like what you saw in the presentation is definitely, I think, more than what I could possibly show you in a couple hours. I think once the software is actually truly released and is available to the public, probably what I'll do is like a little, hey, here's a couple little hidden things maybe that we didn't really get to talk too much about, and maybe go through some of those littler, little topics and things like that. Maybe dig into some other of the stuff that's a bit bigger. Some of the highlights include the new NPM solver, which is it's like a particle-based simulation. Basically what it has is these different ways that it can deal with materials breaking, fracturing, bending, deforming, things like that. And it really kind of exists on a continuum almost. I mean, I know I'm probably oversimplifying a little bit. There's obviously a lot of really complicated math going on inside of it, but that's what the image you see for, kind of this splash image here from 20.5. Obviously this is the snow solver, or not, sorry, it's not a snow solver. It is using a snow preset, but really everything comes from the same node, from the source node. There are presets. There are different kernels in there that are used. However, there is not a like, go do this thing, this node is different than this node. It's a really simple workflow. What you see here is basically the whole the whole thing. And sorry, I'm just looking at some messages here. Yeah, so a couple questions here. Do you know if the slap comp background plate LOP works with XPU in 20.5? I want to say yes. I think there's obviously some limitations with XPU as always. It's always going to lag behind, and there's some things that are just inherently harder to do on a GPU based render than on a CPU based one. So slap comp is different than background plate, and we can talk about that in a little bit. Yeah, so that was one thing. So KG also said they didn't spend a lot of time on recipes, but that looked interesting. Yeah, there's some really cool stuff there, and we can get into that maybe a little bit more when it's released, and we can actually dive in. Because yeah, it's really neat. The UI is really fun, I think, and it gives you some really cool options there. There's kind of a few different ways that gets used. So yeah, we'll definitely want to take a look at that a bit more. So Zach is talking about NPM. NPM for metal and concrete was really interesting. Yeah, so currently the way that NPM works is that it is there is no real like meshing step per se. It would be the same type of meshing that you might do with there's several different ways you can look at that, right? It's just the same way you would do it if you were doing something maybe like a Vellum simulation more so. I think NPM and Vellum, you can think about the way that they treat grains very similarly. They really are this kind of point-based grain type simulation. I think the NPM solver really picks up in some place, like NPM does not just like go, oh yeah, well, Vellum doesn't exist anymore, we've got NPM. Like, no. They're very like, they have the reasons to exist and different, positives and negatives and things like that. So it is just a point cloud, and you can obviously deform meshes in a bunch of different ways. But again, like I was saying here a second ago, like this really is the entire suite of nodes for NPM. I'm pretty sure there's 4 nodes. So it is a very small node set that you have to deal with. However, it's pretty powerful, honestly. Let me see if they go through here and show the source node at all. I'm not sure if they show the parameters of it at all. Let's see. Let this roll for a second. There we go. Okay. Oh, that's the collider. Sorry. Source. Show me source. Boop, 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 boop. I think here we'll probably see it. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So, yeah, so what you can see there is that there is this material preset being shown, and that's kind of the idea that we're talking about here is that you'll have different configurations, right? Zach is just saying, figured it may be a post point deform step or something like that. Yep, exactly. Yeah, fracturing. So honestly, we'll talk about the fracturing and the concrete and the metal and stuff in a second. But yeah, so here we've got this material preset, and really all this is doing is setting attributes for you, or setting parameters on this node, right? It's not quite to the level of like Vellum, where you've got these insane number of different constraints and all this stuff. Like, everybody gets confused from time to time, like, oh, which constraint do I use for this thing? And how do I do this? It's not quite like that. The presets are really more parameters. Now, there are some different presets depending on what like type of material it is, which kind of gets back to that, like, is it a fluid? Is it like more of a solid? I mean, everything here exists on a spectrum. So you can go right from, I think, all the way to gas. Like, honestly, you could go from a solid to a gas in NPM. Now, I don't think we have gas supported really in our setup with NPM, but the idea overall of NPM is that it can handle all that stuff. So it's not like you can do that today, but certainly it's plausible that you could have, really just about any type of simulation working in NPM. And if you look at something like the Loki system that Weta designed and implemented, that is an NPM solution. It's got a lot of their own custom stuff in it, but it's a similar idea. So if you get a sense for what that can do, you can kind of get a sense for what you could do here. So Anyways, there's going to be some interesting things with like, because it's all GPU and there's all these kernels, there's going to be a little bit of compiling time needed to kind of load some of these things up. However, once you take that hit for like putting down the solver and compiling that, that's kind of one of your big hits. When you change one of the types of materials, that'll be another little hit of like have to recompile. Johan is asking, NPM does viscosity? Yeah, for sure. It really can do anything fluid-based, kind of in that viscous to solidish state, and it can even do some solid stuff. Now, I think that's where we can maybe start talking about this, because the metal and concrete and all that stuff was shown, and it's really, really interesting. The only thing you have to know is that it does come with a slight bit of a performance hit the more solid something gets. NPM has this really interesting thing that's implemented in there where it, based on the type of material you're creating, it does some internal calculations and gives it tries to give you a very conservative number of substeps that will keep the simulation stable. So the more solid something is, the higher the substeps need to be. So if you have something like metal or concrete, metal for sure, like if you had a solid ball of metal, you got to really kind of crank up the substeps a little bit to get that to like drop like a solid, right? And like act like metal. Like that's pretty tricky. It has to propagate those collisions through the whole point cloud and all that kind of stuff. So it needs a lot of substeps for that, or iterations. Hey, Sam, welcome. Yeah, it's good to see you again. Great to have you. I know it's a little late for you. I think but yeah, nice to have you. Yeah, so Zach is asking, it seems like it handles fluid really well. It does. And the interest is sand and water mixing. Yeah, that's exactly where this is going to be the most powerful, is when you want those kind of simulations where things blend really like seamlessly. Mud or, dirt eroding into mud, that type of stuff. Like, is it dry and then it gets more wet, and then you could do all sorts of different processes there where you could be transferring attributes and blending attributes across these different types of materials. That's completely possible, melting, that type of stuff. Obviously you get inside of there and do some stuff. There's lots of things that could be done there, and you even see it a little bit in the sneak peek. There's an object that's melting down, and that's really important. So the question is, how does NPM do with large scenes? Does it take up more RAM than Vellum for similar size scene? I think the really interesting thing here is I'm not 100% clear on the RAM usage, because it is all OpenCL. It does, I feel like it needs to use that on the GPU. So that's important. Now it's particles, so it's not like you're sending tons and tons of insane amount of data. I think that's where, if you're getting into something like a huge fluid simulation, you're probably better off going with Flip. So there's these positives and negatives, right? Like Flip is really good for huge simulations, large oceans, things like that. However, if you want that bidirectional coupling of different simulations, you can run into some real tricky problems there. If you want that kind of coupling with NPM, this is going to be really great for that. However, you might run into memory issues with larger and larger scenes, when you get to gigantic, huge scenes. Obviously, you can see that they're clearly doing that large kind of spaceship lifting off scene here. Where is that? Where's that? Here it is. This huge like spacecraft lifting up out of the ground. I mean, this is a ton of particles, obviously. This is like a really crazy number of particles in this simulation. So I don't think that you're going to run into like a crazy limit where it's like, oh, it got bigger than like this little chunk and now you can't do it. Like, it certainly is for large scenes. It just depends on how insanely large they're getting, how close up you're seeing them, things like that. So I think those are important details to kind of think about. But yeah, definitely it can deal with large scenes. It just obviously has an upper limit that's probably going to be based on the GPU, whereas Flip doesn't have that. Like, if you're not using it in an OpenCL mode, you're not going to run into that issue. And and I'm not sure how npm deals with RAM, if it falls back to the system RAM or how that works. But I do know that everything is mainly in memory. Another thing that's kind of interesting to look at here is that if you're doing some sort of a simulation, right, and you want to modify it, obviously you can dive into the npm solver, and there's the there's the presets right there. Sorry, the snow, soil, mud, all that stuff. I knew it had to be in there somewhere. Let me see if it shows the kernels as well, like those things. Let's let it go for a second here. There it is. So if you look at that bottom part there, there's like a thing that says behavior, and those are kind of the different kernels. And when you're changing those behaviors, there's a slight moment where you see a little hit in performance, and that's known. And I think it will be something that is worked on in future releases and things like that to make that better and better. Just for the maybe to be able to pre-process those kernels, so they're pre-compiled or something like that. There's some thoughts on how that might work, but anyways. So those are the presets. They show the behaviors. The behaviors are kind of those kernels that I was talking about, and there's a bunch of fun material presets that are kind of there to get you an idea of kind of where you want to start out with. And you can also get those through the tab menu, I believe. So that's a little bit of that. I mean, obviously, just something to just say here too is if you have any questions or anything you're curious about, drop them in the chat. Happy to answer them, talk about them. There's not really anything that's off limits as far as question wise. I mean, as far as 20.5 and things that have been shown here, like I said, I'm not going to be cracking open 20.5 or anything like that. Sorry if that's what you're here for, but we'll be able to chat a little bit about what's going on and things like that. So, and here in this scene, I think you can really easily see kind of how simple this workflow is. You're basically just creating some sources, you merge them together, stick them into the solver, give it a container and a domain, and that's pretty much that. You know what I mean? Give it some colliders, and it's pretty straightforward. I actually was playing around with making honestly just something really dumb just to kind of see how it worked, and I was just kind of like shooting globs of mud around, and it's just really fun. Like it's a really fun way of working, and it gives you some really interesting results that again blur that line between, is this like a grain simulation, is this a fluid simulation? It's so viscous, but it also feels like mushy in a way that like high viscosity like flip doesn't feel like. So it's got this really interesting combined type of a feeling to it. So pretty neat. Definitely like it a lot. And there's just so many different options that you can do with this. I think food is definitely a really fun one. Here's that sort of metal idea of it breaking and fracturing, and my guess here is that this is actually all like literally completely made up of particles, just a ton of particles that are just so close together that it feels like a full surface. That's my guess, because of the way it's actually just fracturing so many different places. Maybe some of the pieces are meshed back together and then just deformed, like maybe this top lid and down here and stuff. But anyways, as Zach said, Copernicus, the substance design killer. I don't want to even start to play that game. I think we'll be becoming a stronger competitor to Substance Designer. Substance Designer has been doing what Substance Designer does for years now. So, they have a great established workflow, and people use it, and it's a well-known piece of software. So, I don't think I've heard more times internally at Side Effects that like, we're not here to get rid of software from the scene. Like that's never the point. And so I know it's being said in jest, but I think the team at Side Effects really does appreciate having other softwares out there, because it's like, if you're just developing in a vacuum, you can lose your way easily. But like when you have other targets and people doing things, and experimenting in different ways. I think it keeps everybody honest and gives this really kind of fun, you know, world to kind of work in, where there's all these different kind of players and people to kind of at the table. So, yeah, anyways, yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, anyways. Yeah. Oh, for sure. No. KG, I totally agree. Yeah. For iteration purposes, it's super convenient. And Zach, yes, I appreciate that. Pascal, you just were asking a question about the car rig. Yeah, I think it's, I mean, to be honest, that's one part of it that I haven't really played with a ton. Mostly just because it seems so straightforward. And yes, I would assume it really can adapt to pretty much any car model. I mean, it wasn't made with those specific models in mind. It's like a modular tool, you know, that you can have different parts and pieces hooked into it. So yeah, I think it should be really flexible for that. And I think it's nice that it's becoming a bit more of a lower level thing. It seems like instead of just being like kind of like something that's set up, it's becoming more of a tool. So I think that's pretty nice. Sam, you were asking if there's anything special happening with the mud to get sticky particles. Yes, there is actually. So, I wonder if they'll show it here. Let me see again here. I'm gonna go back to this. So this is a question about NPM. So let's look at when they put the collider down. Did they show the collider? Let me look again here. Yeah, wire that in. Cool. And then the NPM container, and I think if we see the collider here, yep. Well, they have container, but let's see the collider parameter. Did we have that? Hello? I don't know if we saw the collider settings. That's too bad. So I can say that there is a property to deal with that. Let me go back here and look at the NPM container, because if you look, this NPM container sort of works like a collider in some ways, right? It's just the domain for the simulation, but it actually has some of these properties that exist on the collider, and this sticky parameter is exactly what you're talking about, Sam. And if you took, say you had like a puddle of mud or something like that on the ground, or honey or something, and you had something you were dipping into it, if you turn that sticky parameter up, anything that collides or comes within that collision area, it's going to stick to that. And then when you pull it up, the absolute the closest particles will be stuck to it. And that's obviously on a sliding scale. And that sliding scale, I believe can even do the in-between kind of stuff where it's like sort of stuck, but also can come off. So I think that's a really fun little addition there, to say that sticky allows you to kind of dip things in, get things stuck to it, and it matches the velocity field, I believe, of the collider that it's coming up against. So yeah, that's a good note to kind of have. Oh, another thing with the NPM solver is that since it's OpenCL, you get the best performance if you do your particles, like if you do any modifications to it using stuff with OpenCL. So if there's any pop nodes that support OpenCL, I think you would want to use those, obviously, or an OpenCL node with the new kind of Wrangle type interface. You can use the other pop nodes. It's just that it's not going to be quite as efficient, because it actually has to do that calculation off the GPU. So it has to transfer that data back and forth, I believe, is how it works. So you do have a little bit of a performance hit for that. But just, it's not crazy. It's just something to keep in mind as you're dealing with those things. So I'm sure that'll be better laid out in the documentation and things like that. So just something to look into. Let's see here. Hold on. So let's see. Jack said the best of Copernicus is how you can mix 2D workflows with SOP nodes, with Solaris. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think Copernicus has some really fun stuff, and we'll probably talk about that in a minute, because I think that's kind of the meat of the presentation. So it's pretty cool. Cyprian said, just finished watching the presentation. It was incredible. I can almost guarantee they worked on those features for more than 7 months. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of the things, is that a lot of times, features won't be ready. They'll take a little longer than expected, things like that. And it's in software development, it's a sliding scale. Some features are like, okay, this is ready. This isn't ready. So, I mean, that has happened with 20.5 too. There's more features that aren't ready yet that are going to be coming out in the next release, type of a thing. That's kind of the nature of software development, right? So I've learned a lot about that in the last 2 years that I've worked here, like at Side Effects. Like that has been a real learning experience for me, because I don't know anything about software development. I'm just a guy that knew how to use Houdini and liked to talk about it. So anyways, like, seeing the software development side of things is amazing, how it just kind of keeps rolling. Like, it doesn't, there's no, there's only deadlines, in the sense of like, we have to ship something. So, okay, like, you either choose to ship something that's good or ship something that's not good. Right. And so, those are interesting decisions to be made. And I think they do a pretty good job with that most of the time. So, I hats off to everybody over there. It's crazy to see the stuff they do. It's fantastic just to be a fly in the wall a lot of times. And Keat was saying, I recall they said something about OpenCL snippets during the Copernicus part. Yeah, you can, that was actually something that was added, I want to say in 20, that there were, OpenCL snippets. I would actually have to look at that. Let me pull that up and see, because I don't remember that off the top of my head, but let me look. Let's see. Houdini 20. OpenCL. Yeah. So the OpenCL syntax, there's like a Wrangle-like syntax that was added in 20. So there has been an OpenCL like snippet idea for since 20. That's definitely been something that's existed. And yeah, it can extend to any part of Houdini. I mean, OpenCL is just a way to process data on the GPU. I mean, the feathers are built with OpenCL snippets in them. In fact, sorry, I got it. Sorry. Don't mean to tease you there, guys. Sorry. Not intentional. It does exist though, so I had that happen, I think, with Houdini 20 at one point, and somebody was like, "Hey, I saw Houdini 20 on your computer when you were streaming." And I'm like, "Yeah, it does exist." I mean, I'm not gonna lie about it. Sorry, I didn't mean to tease you. I was just gonna open this up because I'm pretty sure we'll see that there is an OpenCL snippet in here, and yeah, that would have been an oopsie. Yeah. Oh, believe guys. The number of times, like, I try not to keep it. I'm on a workstation right now, and I have a laptop that I work on most of the day, and I try not to have it installed on my workstation. But once I've started like playing with more advanced features that my laptop is like a little bit like a little iffy on, I will install it over here from time to time, and it's just like while I'm streaming, I'm like looking at the taskbar sometimes and just being like, oh, please God, don't have loaded up the wrong thing. But anyway, so if we look at, I want to say some of the feather stuff is OpenCL. I mean, this is an interesting question, to ask anyways. So let's just take a look at this real quick. Let's see here. So if we do feather, I want to say like some of these nodes have OpenCL in them somewhere here. Yeah, I'm not going to find it probably. Let's see. But there is an OpenCL node here, and it has a little, this is what it looks like basically. So this has been in 20, and this exists. And like the position is equals to at p, oops, sorry. It's from my auto save. At p.set position. Like, so it's it's not Vex, but it has this enable at binding, which allows for it to feel a bit more like Vex now, where it does some bindings for you and things like that. So anyways, yes, it is possible to do this. And there's certainly, I'm sure, a lot of information that you could find about that already out there. So, yeah, it includes the rest of Houdini. So I think that's pretty exciting. Just like to answer the question about this tire thing here, I think you can see that, or the car thing, I think here you can see that these pieces aren't like built into like the tool or anything like that. It's basically just saying like, what pieces do you want to deform and be a part of this, right? There's different ways to set this up with like constraints and things like that. So it's really all about taking pieces that you've created and adding them into the car setup. So so I think one of my favorite new features is one that goes really, really quickly through here. And it was in the Solaris part. And granted, so I've kind of, within my team, I've kind of been branded as the USD guy. And so I've kind of lived in that world pretty heavily. People ask me a lot of questions about it, especially within like the education space. And so one of the things I'm honestly most excited about is this right here, the quick surface material, because at its face, it does not seem like very much, but I think that this is one of the best features added in Houdini 20 or 20.5, sorry. Because I think it's not immediately clear that what this actually is. So what this is now finally a complete sort of, I guess you could call it like an Uber shader for Material X. Like this has everything built in already. Like this is a complete shader that has texture support. You can see right here, you can easily just load in maps, textures, things like that. You can have it look at primvars for attributes to drive those colors, roughness, transmission, things like that. It's all set up already for you. So it's like, it's got all the maps you need, all of the controls that you might need, like a standard surface that would be in any other piece of software. It's all built, plugged in, ready to go, fully like fleshed out. And it's really interesting because it actually is it's already a USD file that's saved on disk that has all this information in it that actually built the USD file actually runs a script to build this UI in this edit material properties node. So it's a little bit of a workaround, but I think it's actually really elegant the way that it works. And so for me, this one is like so big because it's like a lot of times people come into Solaris and want to have like PBR materials, and it's like really like it takes a bit. You got to be like, okay, what's the image node called? What do I have to do for normal maps? What's the best thing to do there? They have to be a vector 3. That's right, I forgot. And the color has to be a color. Like all these different things. It's all set up here already. We've done all the stuff for you. And there's a quick material for volumes as well. So there's both of those things that exist. So it's really, really nice. And it's just basically like set your material up and go. It instantly can add them in directly from the component builder. So if you're making assets, it'll just pop them up and it'll like wire them in for you. If you're in a material library, you can add them there. There's there's little buttons all over the place for them. So that's, I think, a really exciting thing. Sam, I saw you mention something about the Apex auto rig tools, and I haven't spent much time with Apex, to be honest, just because I don't know character animation very well, and we have someone else on our team that's been doing character animation in Houdini for like 20 years. But also in the education space, we've kind of been at the mindset of like, especially with the last release, that Apex was kind of not ready for prime time yet. And to start trying to get students to dive into it, I think would be a disservice. I think with this release, though, that's going to change. Our tone is going to change on that for the education space because of things like Apex Script and ways of doing things a bit quicker. So yes. So it's really, I think I want to get into it, but I haven't yet. And honestly, a lot of the Apex stuff, was kind of some of the first I saw a few of those things there, just mostly because that sometimes goes a little over my head, all the animation stuff. So, so for basic materials, yes, I would say the material builder workflow it really does not have to be done anymore. And I think that when we develop Houdini, we think very much of the DNEGs and Wētas and Disneys and Pixars of the world, where they have their own, like, where this really doesn't apply to them. So this is just a little bit of a Band-Aid for us. But in my mind, this is the material I make every time I go into a material network and then don't make a preset for it or don't make an whatever. Like, there's a litany of reasons why you don't save those presets out because you're not thinking about it in the moment. But like, I don't know of another material that I would really need to make beyond this. You know what I mean? Like, most of my materials are just textures plugged into a standard surface. I mean, I'm not a texture artist either. So like, I think in the motion graphics world and, in the commercial world, I think this could really be one node and you're done. You just add it in. There's also a node to add color to objects too, which sounds so stupid, but it's actually like not a trivial thing to think about how weird that is to do in USD in some ways. So there's now like a color node as well. So that's a really nice new feature. Actually, I don't think they showed that, but it's really cool. Yeah, living in USD. Yep. So I think for really basic materials, I don't really know why you would do it, because if you do like a I think it's called Edit Material Network, and it'll like, you can have it load up the network of nodes that is kind of being built inside of this Material X network. You would see how actually pretty complicated it is. I mean, there's a primvar reader, a color map reader, probably other things as well. I'm trying to think if there's other things in here. But there's at least those two for like every property. So like in a standard surface type of world that's not doing anything that's like weird or like non-photorealistic or adding in strange, like non-physically accurate things, like I can't think of a lot of things that you would really need. So unless you're doing like noises and things like that, like, hey, Zach, welcome to the stream. So from that standpoint, I think it's a really exciting change there. Also, this updated stage manager is really cool. It's like way more like a layout tool now. And so it just feels really nice. Like the inspector, there's an inspector there that'll let you change. You don't see it here, I don't think, but your inspector shows like how you want to create those things, like what type of what variant you want to set on them. Obviously you can do that in the viewport as well, but I kind of like the inspector honestly a bit more personally, but I think people have different ways of working, but yeah, so it just feels way more like thought through, and it's just really, really nice. So that's a nice, and you can see here too, like all of these things are in here, right? Everything, like these are all built in here. So, pretty nice, way of doing things. And so what you'll end up, I think, I'm trying to think of exactly how this is going to work. This is going to be it'll have a class set up for it. So that's good. Yeah, I'm trying to think if this is going to be an instanceable, like if this is going to be a referenced texture, if it's a specialized texture in like USD speak. But basically what you're going to be doing when you put these quick surface materials down is making, references to this USD layer, right? That's already created, this USD file on disk that has this shader built in, and then you'll make edits to it in each of the specific references. And there's a class primitive built in. So if you need to make overrides to your scene later on down the line, you just put your overrides under class _material and then put it in there, and you can override your materials. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. One other thing to note here is that as they go through, you might notice, hello. Oh yeah, there you go. There's your component material. They did show this, I forgot. Yeah, you can add them in that way, and there's your edit materials. So this is like the component builder way of doing that, and it's really nice. You can see there's all these different little like quick material buttons and drop downs and things like that. So it is really pretty well built in. But I just want to point out this little button here. If we look there, that's actually the Copernicus button. And so that will allow for you to create a Copernicus network that'll be referenced or reference in a Copernicus node into your color maps and things like that. So we've already started thinking about those workflows and trying to make those a little easier for people to deal with. So that'll be a nice way to kind of link those things between. And so that and hopefully answers your question there, Ankit. We don't need to write out Copernicus textures at disk. You don't have to, no. I think obviously there's reasons to do it and not to do it. Like if you're sending something to maybe to like a farm or things like that, like having the file on disk might save you some processing time. Like when you start up a new, instance of whatever Houdini to render that and, or if you're sending it somewhere where you're rendering it, whatever, there's many different ways that why you might want to do that or not do that. But yeah, you can just have them right in the color map with an op. It'll be like one of those op paths. Sam, you were just saying, totally agree in Apex. Yeah. No. That's no problem with the delay. No, that's great. Yeah, I do think that Apex is getting to the point where it still is beta. It still says beta there. I think we realize that it's still not quite ready yet, but it's getting pretty ready. Like it's beta, but I think it's like on the like beta, like it's like maybe the last release was like a 0.5 release. This is like a 0.75 or 0.8 or 0.9 release. Like it's close, Zach was asking, when you render to a USD, I would assume it automatically exports the Copernicus image outputs. Do you mean like if you're using a texture that it renders them, exports them? I'm not sure on that one. That's an interesting question. Maybe you have more to like kind of specify there with that a little bit, Zach, but it does work. Oh, yeah. You would probably want to actually save out your textures if you were using it. I don't know of what, like Copernicus I've played around with a bit, but not to the level that some of the folks on our staff have. But I'm not sure of the exact workflow there as far as writing those to disk within USD, because obviously you're talking about a bunch of different things going on there. Yeah, I have a feeling that USD wouldn't just be able to keep that. It would have to have a path to something. So it would probably have to write those out to disk, like if you're exporting something to disk. Yeah, like Husk, like if you're rendering in Houdini, it doesn't have to. But if you were saving it somewhere else, yeah, you would probably have to do that. So yeah, that I'm not sure of the exact mechanism there, but I'm pretty confident that there's something, kind of set up there. Yeah, so if anybody has any other specific questions, happy to kind of talk about certain things. I might just kind of scrub through here and see what I find interesting. Obviously the Apex stuff is amazing. Like these feather tools here are just so nice. And Keith, you're asking about the Vulcan viewport. Yeah, I haven't noticed anything recently, honestly. Nothing. I've really noticed absolutely nothing. The one thing I did notice in Solaris was that my file loaded in Vulcan, or at least in 20.5. I don't know what technical reasoning for it was, but a file. So I made this scene for a USD asset course that I made with a bunch of stuff on shelves, and they're all instanced and all this stuff. And I loaded that in because I wanted to look at it for something, and it took a while to load, and I was in 20, and I was kind of like, man, that took a longer to load than I would like for it to. I was like, I wonder how that would work in 20.5. I wonder if like in the viewport it's any better, because if you don't know, the OpenCL viewport in Solaris is different than the OpenCL viewport in Houdini, because the one in Solaris is a Hydra delegate. So it's a totally different beast. I mean, it's the same, it's inherently the same concept. It's just different. So now we have a Vulcan Hydra delegate. So I was like, okay, could that be different? I know they've done some stuff there under the hood, on the really technical level, to get things working a little better with the viewport. So I think it loaded like, I want to say it took 22 seconds to like compose the scene in GL, and it took like 7 when I was doing it in 20.5. Now, whether that was down to Vulcan or some other thing behind the scenes, but it was really nice. Like that, I was like, wow, that's a major improvement. And I think the look of it is a little bit like, it's not drastically different, but there's just like a little bit of a nicer look in Solaris specifically. I don't really notice a huge difference in Houdini itself, but in Solaris, there's like something just slightly different about it. I'm not sure what exactly it is, if it's that the shadows are enabled by default or something, but it's slightly different. I'm guessing that's the default thing, maybe because there isn't the performance hit that there would have been in GL maybe. But anyways, so for the feathers and the animation state for the rigging, this is just so mind-blowing to me, like what's going on here. I haven't truly looked at all the tech going on inside of this, but man, it's just so crazy that we literally have like this, it's basically like a compiled graph that's like that's like deforming all of these feathers like in real time. It's just so nuts to me how this is all working in basically real time. Because if you've done anything with feathers before, just in SOPs, where you would think that would be a fair, like, yeah, it would be slower, but you'd think it wouldn't be too bad. It can really slow down a lot if you have a fully feathered character. Like, you oftentimes will do different things to make it just play back a little bit better, depending on your hardware and blah, blah, blah. But the fact that they were like doing all of these, deformations and all these things in real time with basically the fully groomed character is just so insane to me. Like I really couldn't believe it. I haven't really investigated this super deep. Like I said, I did some node reference videos on feathers and things like that for the last release, but the education team has actually been a little bit more lightly doing things for this release, just because not to say that Side Effects isn't releasing stuff. I mean, education meaning schools and teachers and stuff. We have a lot of internal a lot of specific things that we're doing that are much different than making courses right now. So the marketing team and people like that are dealing with a lot of those things that you'll see out there. Oh, hey, CG4, hey man, how you doing? Welcome. Yeah, Tyler, welcome. So I thought this was just so cool, and I really want to dive in and get a little bit better understanding of this. It was a little tricky because like I understand the feather side of it, but then the apex side, I'm kind of like, oh, it's a little much for me. But it seems like all the layering stuff and all of that is really going to be cool for animators and artists and things like that. So I'm guessing in a couple of years we might start seeing more demos at places like SIGGRAPH and things like that, where you're seeing artists that are like, oh, I was animating in in this animate state in Houdini and using the feather deform, like stuff like this. Like, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty wild to see it happening. So anyways, lots of cool stuff there. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, anything like that, feel free to drop it in the chat. Happy to look at, your questions, talk about things like that. Oh, great question, Zach. That is a wonderful question. Let me just take a drink real quick and we will get to that. Let's see, there it is. So yeah, so what the crowd procedural does is that it's got some really interesting logic built into it. So what it does is it actually will look at, I don't know how it'll show this in this. I'll let this play real quick. Yeah. So here we're visualizing the instances, and what it's going to do is it's going to try to match poses for characters, right? And match what it is that they're doing, and try to then instance them based on that. And yeah, it's like clustering them in a way. And so I believe in this case, the yellow ones are the source, the white ones are untouched, and the blue ones are the instanced. I could be wrong on that. Let's see if it says. Nope, it doesn't say there. But what the logic of the system is that it will. So you can set a camera, and so it will actually prefer things that are closer to the camera. Now in this case, I think it might be looking at the viewport to do this. I'm not exactly sure, because we are seeing some yellow ones that are obviously way in the distance, like all the way in the back. But it is preferring stuff that's a bit further. But you can specifically have an LOD camera that'll just look at it and say, okay, these are the ones that are going to be in the foreground. So make sure these aren't being instanced and having similar motions and things like that. And the ones in the background, let them do whatever. And then that way you get that huge performance boost without seeing, there's this one character in the background way back here, maybe as a pixel, right? So like, yeah, it's not a big deal. You got some movement, great. But like the guys in the front, you can have it driven by the camera base, and you can also set the threshold there, and it'll optimize the identical poses. I think what that does is like I'm forgetting now. Actually, sorry. I want to say that will. I think that will give it a little bit more flexibility to be able to. Oh, no. That's if you've actually tried to instance already and have it so that there are multiple if you have your own kind of system set up to make sure that the characters are already sort of instanced in a way, like they're doing the same motion, and have the identical pose already from your crowd sim. Like if you control that really closely, you can check on that optimize identical poses, and it'll see like, oh, these poses are identical. Good. Like those are exactly identical, and we can optimize those even further. I think that's what that check mark does. But yeah, you definitely can keep that uniqueness, and not like you can, especially close to the camera. It really does keep that very nicely. I think, and the next demo here shows that really well. And so, there is also an RBD procedural as well now. And there kind of already was, but it's been sort of tweaked a little bit. I think it's kind of a little bit more flexible now, because it was in the RBD destruction, I want to say, and now it's spun off into its own thing maybe, but don't quote me on that. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, so really cool. That's really awesome. So, just checking. Yep, nothing else. Okay, so let's talk about. I mean, I think there's some cool stuff. Oh yeah, the inflate and the sculpt. I think these are really fun. Fun little nodes and things like that. And Keith was asking, have I noticed speed improvements? Yeah, definitely. I think even Rob PK mentioned that in here at the beginning of his section, which was here. So this is a scene that had no additional adjustments to it. He was saying, like, this is literally just out of the box the scene from 20 that we had created. And he just loaded it up in 20.5. It finished in 1:37, and the 20 version, like the version on 20, was still had 4 minutes to go. So with that, with just this alone, you're seeing massive speed improvements. That's because of like the adaptive sampling and things like that that are happening now in XPU. So I think he also mentioned that when you look at the optics use, I mean, it's really being way more efficient with optics, and that is going to really be seen. I think the newer your graphics card is, so that will be a little bit, mileage may vary, but I think the adaptive sampling should be available to everyone. So, yeah, so that's cool. Yeah, Tyler's from CG Forge is asking, may have missed it in the video. Does Copernicus come with a noise library that goes beyond basic noise patterns? Honestly, I haven't gotten too far into that. I know there's a bunch of different pattern generators in Copernicus. They show a few of them. There's a few different ways that patterns can be made, right? Like you can kind of stamp your own patterns. Let's see where they get into it. Sorry. I mean, like there's these kind of patterns that exist with like tiles and bricks and things like that. I think there's also like some weaving included. This is just a sample of them. And there's also the pattern generation stuff and like shape generation, which is really powerful. And then you can kind of mix that into to the stamping kind of idea, like copy to points, but with like, little bits of texture or things like that. So that's kind of an idea as well, the stamping workflow. So I don't know if there's going to be that many more like quote unquote noises like Voronoi and things like that. Like how Maxon has their like one noise node that has like 20 different noises in it. But I do think you'll be able to create some of those things with all the different patterning tools and things like that exist out there. So, and I don't know what the plans are for the future. I'm sure there's going to be more and more noises added and things like that. I mean, those are major things that are needed. So right now, like they said, this is very much like pattern synthesis and texture synthesis as it's stage 1. And then we'll go further into that from there. But yeah, good question. It's an interesting question. The wrinkle deformer is cool, and that is kind of right with the clip deformer, which was here. Yeah, the wrinkle deformer is really neat because it's like this quasi-static. It's like vellum. It's a vellum node that's like inside of this wrinkle deformer. It's like if you look at the wrinkle deformer, it's got all of the kind of stuff that you would expect from vellum, right? So it's like a quasi-static vellum simulation happening in there. And it's pretty cool how it's able to do that. So it's able to take those things and add, the wrinkles onto them and things like that, based on deformations from some sort of a source, right? So yeah, the wrinkle deformer is really neat. There's some stuff that's that I found, to be honest, I found a little slightly counterintuitive. I think the workflow, I just might need to play with it a little bit more. It just, my first instinct wasn't exactly how it worked, but I think you'll find that it is pretty useful. So, and especially for adding wrinkles to sims, like that's so crazy, like that the stuff it can do. If you're trying to like completely art direct folds and things like that into it using the wrinkles, that gets a little like, sometimes there's like some stuff there that I was a little bit like, I don't know if this is exactly how I would do that, but like how it didn't exactly go the way in my brain that I originally thought it would. So it just maybe a just slight adjustment to how I should think about building the wrinkles, right? Versus how I might have just, I don't know how I was expecting them to be, but yeah, it's really cool that it can do that. And it's quick. Like there's no really time involved. So yeah, the clip tool is really nice. Like the clip by attributes part of it is just so great. So if you've ever seen like the take an attribute, put it into, maybe the Y plane, clip by that, and then deform it back to the rest position, that you basically don't have to do that anymore. It's done now for you. So yeah, that's really nice. It's just built in. And on this, you get to see the lovely middle mouse button menu that can be docked to the side of the screen. I actually haven't even played with that yet. I haven't done that at all yet, but I have seen the middle mouse button. Truth be told, it took me a little bit of time to get used to, just because I've been using Houdini for for a while, I guess. I don't know. So it definitely was like, okay, got to look for things in different spots. But there really are a lot of nice features in there, and like the little check box, little checks and things like that. There is a way to turn off the animations if that bothers you. If you're some curmudgeon-y old person that does not like that or doesn't like change, you can hopefully turn some of those things that might bother you off as well. But yeah, there's the interface. I think there are a couple of things that I might be like, this feels different to me. And that just, I like different. So I like when things change. I truly do. But I think it's just going to take a little bit of time for me to get used to it. But I love that, like, everything feels so much clearer, right? Like, it feels like you can more clearly read the information, which I think is really, really helpful. I wouldn't be surprised if we see, like, I think this is a lot more moldable maybe than the previous iterations of the like middle mouse button menu and things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if like there's just little tweaks over time that happen. Like with the old thing, I think it was much more rigid and couldn't like flex. So I think there may be, like, as people have a version to play with this and put in RFEs, so feel free to RFE if you like, oh, this would be really cool to have in this, or like, oh, when this is in, Copernicus, it could be really cool to have this in there, like RFE stuff, like put in suggestions. Like I can tell you this, that the developers definitely know about RFEs that come in and keep track of those things. So if you have ideas and like thoughts about what or why things would work better, and like specific clear things that you're like, I have a suggestion to do this, like RFE that stuff, like get it in. People, we love to hear feedback on that stuff. So let me see here. Zach says he's going to be wrinkling everything. Yes, wrinkle away. Yeah, the buttons do look really different than Houdini. You're talking about these up at the top. Yeah, those are definitely really different. I think that if you've seen, if you look at it in comparison to, where is it? It was just here, like these render stats here. I feel like you can see that view has a very similar look to it. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see more of this type of a thing happening, over time. I'm not privy to any of that information anyways, but, it wouldn't surprise me to see more stuff start to have this, a bit clearer hierarchy. I think those things are really important, right? It's like the visual hierarchy is where people can get lost a lot of times. Yeah, so I think there's some really cool things that could come from that. A whole UI refresh, man. That seems like a tall task, especially because it's like inherently we're not going to change too much about the way that Houdini works, right? So it's really just kind of a veneer over top of it, which is important, but also like we have, there's kind of two sides of things where it's like there's people that are like, I don't care what it looks like, I just need it to work. And then there's people that are like, I really, really care how it looks. So it's hard to kind of balance that, because I think those two groups can have wildly different needs. So it's definitely a balancing act for something like a UI refresh. The last one was in H16. So that was several years ago. I mean, we're getting close to a decade on that. So definitely feels like it's coming to be time. I mean, from just a logical standpoint, but that definitely would be a tall task. I wouldn't be surprised if we see it a little more incrementally, maybe, than like a whole slam. Here comes this huge new UI refresh thing, but I don't know. Who knows? It's a good question. One thing I actually kind of thought was really funny was I was watching this. So this thing here with the point cloud stuff and like they go into this and they show a couple different little references here. They show this, then they showed this. And I was kind of watching this going, wait a second, is that like Copernicus there happening? Is that a slap comp thing happening there that they didn't really talk about? But like, what are you doing with those lines and how are you doing? Like, maybe that's not, I don't know, but sure seems like it. So I was kind of like, I think that's a Copernicus thing. I'm pretty sure that they just threw a slap comp thing in there before and just didn't mention it and just were like, yeah, it's an outline. Nobody's going to really notice. But I think that's what that is this is from Copernicus, because if you look at the slap comp stuff later, like here, like this is the same thing, right? So I'm pretty sure that's what that is. But anyways, let me see what else anybody's talking about. Yeah, just talking about the CG Forges video. That's cool. Yeah, it'd be cool to update that, take a look at that. Yeah. Houdini definitely looks a little dated compared to Unreal and Blender. Yeah, I think about that a lot. Like what makes it dated? I don't know. I do sort of wonder about that. Like what makes it dated? Like is it all of these little buttons? Is that what makes it look dated? Like sometimes I do that and I'm like, oh, it doesn't look like anything that crazy. Like I don't know. Maybe it's like the windowy menu kind of thing, like where it's like this like Windows like XP style. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's a little strange. Yeah, I don't know. It's such a hard thing to more rounded corners. Just round every corner. Oh, Zach is asking. Yes. Huge list of available preset nodes in Copernicus. I think you're meaning this. Is this the one thing you're meaning? I think this is what you're talking about. So yeah, let's maybe talk a little bit about Copernicus now. I think this might be a good segue to talk a little bit more about what Copernicus is and isn't. Well, first of all, that's the one you're thinking of. Cool. So Copernicus, just for any of you that didn't fully get the sense of, first of all, it's like the last, 30 minutes of this. Jeez, that's a long section. Copernicus is, texture synthesis, creation. It's the new COPS, right? It's COPS 3.0 technically. So here's the really crazy thing. So just in case you come across it, don't be freaked out. So there was COPS, then there was COPS 2. That's the most recent one. And now we have COPS. So we're back to COP because COP 3, there was some reason why they didn't want to do COP 3 and then have COP 2 and, all this stuff. So we're just back to COP. This is just a COPNet because it's Copernicus. It's kind of a totally different thing. It really is sort of a ground up rewrite, So there is no original COPS in here at all. This is based on Apex and like a standard, a non-Apex, traditional cooking method as well. So it's a totally different thing. But there's obviously a lot of cool stuff. And Keith, we'll get to your question first, just because you asked it. So I might as well not ignore you here for too long. Let me go back to that list. So one of the things with the compositor is that we wanted to make sure that it was, OpenFX compatible, I think is the term. And so any OpenFX plugins for compositing can be used in Copernicus, which I actually didn't understand what that meant until today, which is pretty crazy. So I'm going to have to go back and look through some of the conversations to understand that a little bit more. I know one specific developer was working on this part of the process specifically. So I'm curious to see now to go back and read some of those things again. But basically what this means is that obviously you can bring in these Sapphire plugins from Boris FX and have them all work. So, I mean, you've got different lights and card flip and different blurs and flickers and all sorts of things like this, warps and things that could come in from here. And this could also be a little bit of like, so I think we did this partially because we knew that this wasn't going to be a fully featured compositor, right? Like it honestly, within any release cycle these days, it'd be hard to just drop a full new compositor in it, right? And really, this isn't a compositor, it's texture synthesis, right? That's the idea here, is mostly texturing. But if you do want to do a little bit of compositing in here and a little bit of effects or things like that, this is a great place to kind of grab some of those things that haven't been implemented yet. Or like, we don't have things that are going to, put rays in your scene or any of that stuff post process. I mean, it's funny, Zach, I think you're right. It is a good number of features. And Jeff Late, who's, if you don't know Jeff's name, he's been a developer at Side Effects since Houdini 1, I think. I think he was on the original Houdini team, and he's been at Side Effects ever since. Just won an Oscar for VDB stuff recently. Pretty decently smart guy. He was doing a little internal presentation for us on Copernicus, and basically kept saying, like, I know we want to really temper expectations here. And yes, it's brand new and this is a whole new thing, but like, this is basically a 1.0 of a software. It's like, maybe the slap comp stuff is a little beta still, but like the compositing side of things are pretty strong. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in here. Like it pretty closely matches features to Cops 2, like the old Cops. That's actually how it'll show up in 20.5. I think it'll say old Cop net. I mean, I think we do intend for the compositing to be something useful in the future, but for right now, I think it is still limited. Like there still is limitations for sure. But anyways, let's go back and kind of look at some of these details here, and we'll talk a little bit about them. Excuse me, sorry, didn't mean to hiccup in your face. All right. So there's a couple of things here. I mean, this is just pretty standard stuff. Like this isn't anything too crazy. There's some nodes to like keep, to kind of keep in mind here, like mono to RGB. That's basically taking, so there's some of these nodes that'll be really big kind of centers to like how you'll be doing things in here, and like those types of nodes are pretty popular. Obviously remapping, fractal noise, things like that. This preview material, I don't think that they got into this too much, but if you look in here, there is actually a geo. I don't remember seeing them talk about this, but there is a geo input here that you can input your geometry, like kind of a la Apex, down a wire and see your geo in this preview material here. So it's kind of neat that you could do that. Hey Chris, how's it going, man? Welcome. Just what we needed. Yeah. Come chat with us, Chris. Chris Rutledge, your stuff, man. You're just showing up everywhere. We got sweaty, got sweaty guys here on a plane. I love it, Chris. Stuff's looking cool. Can't wait to see like the whole finished piece from you and the Tumblehead guys. Hello, Davi. Welcome. Johan just asking if Karma XPU gets better regarding shader compilation time. I didn't really notice that too much. However, that is something I should mention, though. That's a great question. So shader compilation with that quick surface material, you don't have to recompile pretty much at all, I don't think, with it, because everything's already in the shader, so you're not adding nodes to it. So when you turn things on or off, it's just changing a parameter. It doesn't have to recompile it. It already knows it's all there. Good thing to keep in mind with that quick material too. It's actually pretty efficient from that standpoint as well. I can't wait to see those Annecy talks. Those aren't up online yet, I don't think yet, but I'm really excited to see those. Both of your talks were amazing last year. Those were fantastic. So, really, really good stuff. Thanks for joining us, Chris. And Keith, you were saying, so they're keeping Cops 2 around, even though it's irrelevant, kind of like ShopNet. Yeah. I mean, Cops 2 isn't irrelevant. I mean, think about all the labs nodes that are built with different COPS networks inside of them to output maps and things like that. I'm sure at some point somebody's going to go through and do a sweep of those and start changing out some of those nodes to use Copernicus internally. But it's going to be a process to change some of these older HDAs over to those things. So, it still needs to be there because people are still going to use it. In fact, it probably takes a surprisingly long time for things to actually get removed from Houdini. And it's like a conversation, believe me. Like, if something has shipped with Houdini, it stays. Like, it does not get removed. Like, it's crazy. Like, they're really sticklers about that, to not break people's scenes from 20 years ago or whatever. So like, they're wild, man. They're crazy. Yeah, Chris, that's a great point. I heard there's overhead in the way. They're doing the VOP USD shaders. Yeah, exactly. So that VOP network has a translation that has to go over to a USD, into USD, and then all that stuff, and that's why you're getting those recompiles. But if you're just doing a material like a pretty standard material, that quick surface material is going to not have to compile when you're changing stuff, which is just going to be great. You're not going to run into those weird compile times. So, yeah, it's really nice. Cool. So, yes. So we were talking a little bit about Copernicus networks here. Pretty standard stuff. Hey, La Pampadura, welcome. My mind kind of blew at one point when I saw these SDF shapes I saw this visualization, this like crazy like yellow and blue visualization. I was just like, what in the world is going on with this? Like, when I first saw it, like, I don't know, maybe it was a couple months ago that I first saw someone showing me it. And I was like, this is crazy, man. I don't know what's going on here, but it's a really neat idea. And I hadn't really thought of that with like, this being a way, like, how do you visualize an SDF? And granted, we're looking at a slice of an SDF, right? So like in a normal SDF, this white line would show as our surface. These would be our interior voxels and our exterior voxels, right? So it took, like, when I was first looking at this, I'm like, what are these shapes? Why do they look like this? What's happening here? This is really weird. But it's actually a really interesting way to visualize this, because I'm pretty sure that this is a world unit here. I think these black lines are world units, and then these are probably, you can probably set these to be whatever, but these are probably 0.2 world units each or whatever. And so, yeah, the SDFs are crazy. And so like this SDF to mono is a really powerful tool that you can get into and mess with. I'm pretty sure that there was something I remember hearing something about with the font generation in there, that right now it's a little more complicated than we might probably want in the end to like have font generation in Copernicus. But it is sort of in this thing where it's like, I think the fonts come out as SDFs if I'm thinking about that right. And then you can change them using that SDF to mono node and change how it's, the shading of it and everything like that. Can you feed in an SDF? I think you can. Now the question would be, how does it read that 3-dimensional to 2-dimensional? Like, you have to lower the dimension of your data, right? So that is tricky. So yeah, I'm not sure about that, exactly what the steps are there. That one I'm not totally sure of, but I just think these are so fun because like when you start to see the idea of these, it's like, okay, like we're doing like SDF stuff that we've been doing with VDBs for a long time, but now you're doing it with like textures and shapes and stuff like that. And it's really interesting. You can mono to SDF. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool. So you can go the other way too. That makes sense. So mono to SDF. Yeah. So this black and white node right here where we're going SDF to mono, you could do it the opposite way and probably at some sort of a threshold, put the surface of the SDF there. Yeah, that makes sense. Just like you could do it with a geometric surface when you're doing it in yeah, doing that in SOPs or something. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Makes a ton of sense. Yeah, the texture stuff I haven't been playing with too much either. I've done a little bit with, and so we have a couple training leads on the education team, and we kind of have been doing like a shared thing where each of us have kind of gone into different bits of the software and kind of come back with our findings and shared them with everybody and things like that. So one of the other guys has been kind of diving into this a little bit more because he's really smart. He's really good with rendering and things like that. So but yeah, so, obviously distortion and things like that, pretty cool. All the UV edits and stuff like that. I loved this. This was really cool seeing the tile pattern outputting these different outputs here. And one thing you should note too, when they go through some of these nodes, there's a little title at the bottom there. And as you click that, there's like a little drop down and that tells you what part of it you're visualizing, right? So you can, as you have your display flag on that, I think you can change what you're visualizing. But it's just really cool. Yes, La Pampadour, I definitely did. I definitely did know that. Yeah, I think I said I plead the fifth because I don't want to get in trouble. Yeah, I definitely did. Yeah, the curves into cops is really cool as well. I mean, all these different patterning things, it's just so fun to see how you can play with all these. Yeah, this curves into SOPs. And one thing that they really, really didn't. Yeah, you're welcome. Enjoy your dinner, man. And thanks for joining us. One thing that they didn't really touch on too much here. I mean, they did kind of mention that, like here, they're like, okay, yep, here you can see, I think they turn the height down and then they move it around in 3D space, right? But I don't think we really talk about why it is where it is in 3D space, right? And I don't think they've mentioned that at all in this. And I think it's really interesting because each of these, like when you, like for example, we take our capybara here. Let's look at that. That's I think the best example they showed here. So they take the capybara and project it into these different planes here from a camera position, right? And that is a really, like, it's a directional thing, right? You have, in order to take 3D and collapse it down to 2D, you have to be doing that in some sort of reference plane, right? Like you can't just can't take all the data in now. You can unwrap it and fold it different ways with like the UV unwrap and that type of thing. But if we're doing what we're doing right here, it has to be from a certain perspective, right? That perspective goes into Copernicus. Copernicus knows that perspective. So I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but just think about how interesting that is, that the camera information, that Copernicus knows about the camera information and the viewpoint that you're using when you rasterize your geometry, right? So if you have a camera that is moving around in a scene and you rasterize your geometry, it's going to move around. You know what I mean? Like you can set it to go back to the origin so that it's not moving and things like that. There's ways to do that. But it does know about that. It needs to know about that to be able to properly import and bring in this geometry. So just a really interesting little side note there that's, I think, super cool and just really wild to like see it when it projects these things and it's like they're in the 3D space. You're like, huh? That's wild. Like, I don't quite understand why it's doing that, but I think that's a feature that will be used more in the future is my guess. And it's pretty cool. So obviously this is a really cool thing to be able to take these attributes, project them in. Obviously here we're using a top-down camera to look at that top-down view and get those attributes and normals and, like IDs from those. Yeah. Yes. It needs to have. COPS is natively in 3D. So it's dealing with 2D data, but it has to know about the 3D nature of where that data is coming from. So it's a weird distinction. And I don't remember who said that. If Kristen said that, somebody said it in there, like that these are in 3D. And like, that is the weird, like, it's just different. It's just a really different way of doing it because we're a 3D software, right? Like you have 2D viewers, you have all that normal stuff, but so if you look at the composite view, right? Like the standard COPS view, it's going to be 2D, right? But if you bring that into SOPs and it has geometry that's been rasterized from a certain perspective, it's going to see it from that perspective. So, it's pretty crazy stuff. Like it's out there, man. It's wild. Yeah, I think, Chris, that's a great point. It's like this is all like in one software package and it's all talking to each other. Like just think about like we can rasterize attributes from geometry into 2D space and see it updating basically live because Vulcan is like, I just don't even understand. Like, I don't fully understand what it's doing. Like obviously I'm not a programmer. I'm not a, I don't even know. Like, it's just so mind boggling, the stuff that they're doing and really how quick it is, right? Like you see these examples and it's like, it's just impressive. Like the way that it can play these things back in these different planes and stuff like that. There's some interesting controls about the way that Copernicus works too. I don't know if you see it. Oh yeah, here. There's some interesting stuff here where you can set the different resolutions, set proxy resolutions and things like that. Like people are gonna abuse this, Zach, so much. Like I can't even believe how crazy people are gonna abuse this. Hey, Waffle Boy Tom, I see him typing in the chat. No way. The man. He's Tom will never admit to it, but he made quite a few of these Copernicus demos and things like that. And it's pretty cool. And it's good stuff. He did a lot of these he did a lot of these like crazy crag stuff. I think this one might be his. I think a few of these here might be his. He did a lot of fun, Mr. Waffle Boy. He did a lot of good stuff. So congrats, Tom, on that. Wait, oh yeah, there's another one from Tom. Tom was saying he didn't even know that some of these things were going to go into the presentation. He was just like, oh, I did that. It's pretty cool. If you're ever looking for internships at Side Effects, you could play with all this fun stuff. It's pretty cool. Anyways, so this whole part two, I really, really, legend. Yeah. He's a legend and he loves waffles, like that's just good. That's just good. That's good stuff. Belgian waffles too. He's from Belgium. So, he stopped typing. I don't know. I scared him off apparently. Anyways. I loved this whole section. Like somebody asked me about something like this not too long ago. Yeah, he does. He's definitely, Tom's a mad scientist in a lot of ways. He's a good dude. Got stuck in Niagara Falls for a couple of days a few months ago, and that was pretty epic too. So he's a fun guy to hang out with. So this was really cool because somebody was Tom's trying to watch on the subway in Toronto, and that's I can imagine that's a tough task. Yeah, Tom had a lot of Copernicus time making up different things. I think he actually did the Copernicus with the OpenCL stuff. I think he did that as well. So yeah, lots of Matt is likely, scientist not as much. Don't let him fool you. Tom got I think he got a note or two in Copernicus as well. So I mean, Tom's the real deal. He's the real deal, folks. But yeah, somebody was, yeah, that's true. He did the wet map stuff as well. That's right. I forgot about that. That's fantastic. Somebody had asked me about something like this with like streaking, like rust from rivets and stuff. And I was like trying to think about it and just like COPS is so clunky and outdated, like old COPS. And I was like, we tried to play around with it for a while, and I was like, yeah, I don't really have a good answer for you. I'm sorry. And we chatted about it, but like now it's like, it's so possible. Like the idea of just like, oh yeah, you can just bring your geometry in and know what position the geometry's in and just boop, done. Like it just knows, which direction it should flow in based on the curvature of your geometry, or you could add an attribute to the surface of it, rasterize, it's just crazy the stuff you can do. So yeah, really, really cool stuff. I think a lot of this stuff, like this here, this is obviously like, you can see that this is real time, like, right. Like this isn't something that's going to be like blazing fast to like have these like textures like this and all, all this stuff happening. But these, I think, are the types of things that we're going to try to, improve performance over time too, right? Like to make these things, more and more efficient, and the processing of them faster. But it's still cool that it exists in there right now, right? So like for this call, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you get these. So oftentimes people will see demos that are like, oh, look at how cool and fast this is. And then you like go to mess around with it and you're like, it's a little slower than I was really hoping it would be. I guess I just want to make sure expectations are properly tempered. I think that's kind of, maybe it's because Side Effects, we're all Canadian. We're very apologetic and want to make sure everybody's not going to be disappointed. Like, let's be realistic here. Like, I don't know. It's a little bit of that, like, oh, sorry. Like, don't want to ruffle any feathers. But yeah, so that's really cool. Obviously the texturing on the wet maps or on height fields is really cool to have a way to like procedurally color them now, which is just like, we never really had a good way to do that, or was always really like clunky and weird. So that's pretty under promise, over deliver. Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the slap comp. Oh, Sprawa, just Houdini beginner, welcome. Nice to have you in the chat. Are there any improvements for modeling in 20.5? Well, I would say the sculpting tools are definitely like a good improvement to some modeling things that you might be doing. I mean, it's not ZBrush, obviously. That's a pretty high bar, but that's one thing that they really tried to improve with. The quad remesher has gotten much better with modeling, so that'll be really nice for anybody that's needing to retopologize stuff or get CAD models in a better place. I've seen some demos of that with some really complicated geometry, and it's doing like unimpressively, like a decently better job. Like it's definitely really nice, and it's fast still, so that's good. I don't know beyond those two things, like what else there. I mean, there's the planar inflate, which is pretty cool for like doing like inflated geometry from flat surfaces, which seems really random, but it's super, like you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. So I mean, it's not a huge one. Oh yeah, Clip 2.0, great. Yes, good point. Yeah, Clip 2.0 is a huge one for different modeling stuff. So that's nice. Pillows for architects, pillows for sleeping when you are working too long of a day. All right. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about what the heck slap comp is, because I was really excited for this because this is such a wild, different thing. And I think that this is something that's, I think this probably is the one thing at Copernicus, like I said, that's still probably the most beta, but it's really exciting because I think it's just like, it's super tip of the iceberg, right? Like, so let me take one quick break and we'll talk about some slap comp. All right. So yeah, slap comp is do any Copernicus nodes work in yeah, I don't think there's any Copernicus. So I don't know the answer to that. Probably Tom would be able to answer that. I don't know if there's any that don't work they'd have to be compilable, right? Because it's kind of that idea of like a compiled block, right? So they'd have to be compilable, but I don't think anything. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think all Copernicus nodes work in SlapComp. I can't think of anything that doesn't. Yeah. No, I think they all do. But yeah, so they didn't really go super in depth with this, I don't think. Let me just see if I can remember any spots. Yeah, but on your SlapComp import, that's kind of the crux of the workflow, right? Is the SlapComp import. And when you do that, you can pull in different render passes, right? So here we're just pulling in C and depth, but you can pull in different passes from your render, right? From Karma. So that will allow you to, do different things. Say you wanted to bring in your UV map to use for something, or the normal map or something like that. You could render that out. And when you make a SlapComp network, I think it'll look at all of the inputs that you have currently, and it'll make those, I think, for you. I forget exactly where that landed, but like as it was developing, like what the actual workflow is for like building a new SlapComp block like that. But I'm pretty sure it'll use all of the available things that are output. And let me see here if there's any other examples of this. Just looking, see. Yeah, that's input video footage. Here we go. This is the SlapComp stuff here. Yeah, so you can see that we're going to bring in all of these different things, like we're bringing in IDs and normals, depth, all that stuff to help build this. So you can bring in all these different outputs and use those in the SlapComp network to drive how this stuff is going. So you can bring in the geometry information and then use that to drive all of this stuff into your network for SlapComp. Now, I'm actually thinking about that. Can you use what is it the rasterized geo node to input into a SlapComp block? I'm trying to think of exactly how that would work, but anyways, there's lots of ways that you can get all the information in there. And a lot of this is what's, being used here. You're using, you can use world position. You could use texture coordinates, all that kind of stuff. Fractaler. Yeah, I guess you can export these outputs separately, right? Yep, exactly. Yeah, you can export these all out separately as different passes and things like that. Like, and I forget exactly how it works within Karma, right? Because it's going to pass that information back to, it's going to pass that information back to the, sorry, I'm just looking here to see what this Pyro network looks like. I'm just trying to remember. Just not sure if they show the output there. Yeah, so yeah, there's going to be you'd be able to save out each of these different points in your network just like you would with any other type of thing in Houdini, where you'd have like, okay, I want this output null, I'm going to output this null as this file or whatever. So oh, I see, Fractaler, you're La Pampadura on Twitch. I got you. Yeah, you can output your planes. Your planes go into the SlapComp, right? Because it's kind of a post process to it, and then from there, you can modify things and add them on top of it and stuff like that. It's definitely a very, like, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to that. So it's kind of hard to think about how everything gets like, I haven't really personally seen like a ton of stuff where they're like, here's how I saved this out. Like, it's mostly just like, here's what it looks like. So I don't know the exact like steps of like getting each pass saved out and stuff like that. But I know there were a lot of conversations about, oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Quality stuck to 1080p in Twitch. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a lot of conversations about like when you have a ton of, layers in your render, right? You've got a ton of, image planes or whatever you want to call them. You render those out, like you got to bring those all into slap comp and like, how does that work and all that kind of stuff. So I know there's some conversations based around that were happening. So I don't know exactly where that all landed in the end, but yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting to kind of see how this stuff all works. And obviously this is like a really condensed slap comp thing, right? Like this is the whole slap comp network, and it will add this on top when you hit this button, and you'll see it in the viewport, and then you can add that into your render as well. So you can add it on like a post effect layer. I think that gets baked in. You probably can also save it as a separate pass, I would think, like a separate render pass. But yeah, it's those are kind of, this is kind of like the most self-contained example of the slap comp idea. But I think there's just so many like exciting little bits and pieces in Copernicus. Like, it really is crazy. It's always really interesting to see the development of a software. Like, I mean, it's like, I don't have anything to do with it, but it is crazy to see like how quickly stuff can happen sometimes. Like, you'd be like, one day it'll be like, oh, look, this thing is working. We can render an image in Copernicus. Cool. And then it's like, oh, we can do this now. And it's just crazy how that stuff just kind of ramps up and ramps up. So it's really exciting to kind of, I think this is probably I want to say this is the first like brand new feature I've been able to kind of watch from the very start at Side Effects. So it was pretty exciting for me to be able to kind of see this come to fruition and be made, even though I had, like I said, literally nothing to do with the creation of it. It's just been fun to sit and watch, from the sidelines. And yeah, I don't know if I've had any input into it because I'm not a compositor. I'm not a look dev artist, a texture or anything like that. Like, that's not my world. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's cool to get to see how this stuff all works. So yeah, lots of really exciting stuff here too. I was watching this part here and I was thinking about you've seen all the Spider-Verse stuff and things like that, and the integration with Rebel. And now looking at this with Copernicus, like obviously this is all Copernicus, and it's cool. Like, it's cool looking. If you've seen the stuff from Rebel, it's absolutely mind-boggling. It's really, really cool stuff. But I can just only imagine now what would be way more feasible with a workflow like this, where we have all of these tools to be able to do something Spider-Verse level, probably way easier with a lot of tools that just did not exist, at all in Houdini until, well, not even yet technically, but they're real. They're real tools that will really be out there. Cool. We're definitely not at the end of chatting about this, but just if you guys have any other thoughts or questions or parts of this that you'd like to chat about, this is I don't think we even watched the Wrinkle Deformer stuff, but it's pretty fun. So yeah, if you guys have any other questions or thoughts or anything's of interest to you, happy to chat about it as best I can. I have varying levels of knowledge in different parts of the software, but certainly is really exciting to see this stuff. So yeah, I'm just kind of scrubbing through to look at what's here. I mean, I think we pretty much covered everything, I think, at a high level and chatted about it. Yeah, like I said, if you guys have any questions, any thoughts, comments, any curiosities, I'll do my best to answer them if I can. If not, I'll defer that to whatever next version of Houdini comes out, when we talk about that. But this is so cool. I love that this kind of stuff is in Apex. And I think the important thing to kind of realize here, that when we're talking about this this wrinkle deformer being in Apex, right? Technically anything SOPs could be, you could use anything in SOPs in Apex, because Apex runs any compilable SOP, right? Any of the compilable SOPs that are out there. So the fact that the wrinkle deformer is in SOPs means that it's in Apex, that it's compilable in SOPs, I guess I should say, means that it's able to go into Apex, right? So that's a really important thing, I think, to remember, is that when we're talking about Apex, we're talking about a really, like, I've talked about this a little bit before, that it's like the ideas that have kind of led to Apex are like compiled blocks that invoke graphs. And now we're kind of into Apex, and Apex is kind of like all of those things on steroids together. Right. And that's why you can get this performance in, for an animated character like this, because it's all compiled, it's all able to be run really efficiently, and it's really pretty neat to be able to do that. So it really isn't a fact of like, oh, that's cool, they made it so the wrinkle deformer works with Apex. It's kind of more like we packaged up an HDA that is doing all the Apex stuff for you to be able to use that SOPs with the Apex tools, right? That's really a better way to think about it, right? Because sometimes we like to like silo these things in their own little worlds, but they're like, things really blur a lot in Houdini, right? Like, you have Apex that's running Copernicus, right? Like, what? That's crazy. Like, that's crazy to think about. Like, Apex is now not just rigging. And I think that's going to be a tricky thing to figure out, because Apex will do more than I'm pretty confident Apex will do more than animation and composite and texture synthesis / someday maybe compositing. But excuse me. Could sneeze. Nope, lost it. Anyways, just important things to remember, that there can be a lot of blurred lines in Houdini, so things to keep in mind. Zach, you were talking about the Python but not Python codes. Yes, it's a good point. Let's see, where is that? I know Esther was talking about that. Where was she talking about that? Here. Yep. So we're talking about Apex script. So Apex script is a Python-like language that enables users to not have to deal with crazy networks of nodes in Apex, right? And I think you'll see in a second here that, for example, this script here would create this graph, right? Because don't forget, Apex is a way of building graphs. It's a way of building node networks, right? So this is Python-like. It is not Python, but we've tried to make it work the same as Python, I think, so that people are really familiar with it. So this is like, this is sort of this is like a VexVops thing, sort of. Like, it's not, but sort of, like, it's sort of that kind of concept, right? So maybe think of it that way, right? Where you've got the nodes that you could get in and play with, but the nodes are describing, like, the code describes the nodes and the nodes describe the code. It's kind of all like, there's a bunch of stuff happening, right? It's all visual scripting in some way, right? But so it's just an important thing to kind of remember that those things are happening, right? Because the Apex graph is a way of building a compilable SOP graph in a way, right? So there's some of those things as well. So Yeah, it's all very, this is super complicated stuff, and I think that's why Apex can be really scary to people, but it's definitely exciting that there's now more of a way to get into the scripting side of it. And it really shouldn't, it should be quite a bit more attainable for people that are familiar with a little bit of programming, that are familiar with, like, you know, the rigging side of things, right, is a little bit more technical than obviously the animation. And so that's really the beauty of this, right? Like, the reason that we've created the Apex animation setup the way we did, this new animation state, is that we want it to just literally be one node for animators. Like, we don't want them to have to deal with all of these nodes here you're seeing are just building the rig. Like, that's all it's doing. You can save that whole set of everything that comes out of those nodes as a BGO file, write it to disk, and the like, all of this stuff does not need to be seen by a character animator ever. Not at all, zero. And I don't even know if we even are showing the animate state in any of these. Oh, right there. So, like, literally this down here, this little box should be, I mean, maybe that's even more than the animator would ever have to see. Like, the character, you know, rigging TD, whatever their title is, would do all of this stuff, hand them maybe an HDA that loads a file from disk that has all of this information in it, that has all these transient controls and different things like that they can turn on and off, and they can add these little, you know, flexible animation points, and, you know, these transient handles and stuff like that. It's crazy. It's just so nuts the way that it works. So yeah, it's exciting. So Fractal was just saying, with Wrinkle Deformer, it's like three different programs. JRV said, stuck between learning substance design now. I'm at the beginning of my journey, but I feel rather double down on Copernicus. It said, yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, honestly, I'm like, I work for Side Effects. You know, obviously I think Houdini is a great tool for doing a lot of things. Like, it's real, like, learning is often more about fundamentals than what button to press, right? So if you're learning the fundamentals in Substance Designer and that's going great right now and you feel like you're making traction, I'd say stick with it maybe for a little bit, like, see how it feels, and keep an eye on Copernicus, and kind of, you know, you can't switch today anyways, you know what I mean? So, you know, I think that's an important thing to remember, is that fundamentals are huge to these things. Like, these are just tools, right? Like, as an artist, you have to learn how to make art. You, like, pushing the button is like, you know, the muscle memory part of it, like a paintbrush or whatever. Like, I'm not an artist, so I'm saying this more from an academic standpoint, but I think that's how I would look at it. Zach, that's so Zach is going to say the opposite of me there, so that's funny. But yeah, hey, I mean, to each his own. Do your thing, man. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, so I think, yeah, I think it really depends on where you are in your journey, man. Like, if you're trying to, if you are going to be working in Houdini a lot already, then yeah, maybe this does work for you. If you're working in a plethora of other programs, maybe not, you know, I don't know. Anyways, I do think fundamentals are really important. I'm going to stick by that, because I find that with a bunch of things that we teach anyways. So, yeah. So yeah, I think we, again, you know, when we look at adding something like a sculpt node, when we look at something like Copernicus, it's not that we're looking at the industry and going, oh, what software can we try to run out of town, right? Like, that is like, regardless of what anyone would ever say publicly, that is not the internal conversation that's happening. I can promise you that. And like, so Kristen, the guy that started this all off, he's the head of R&D, and basically what he says goes. And like, the stuff that he's saying there at the very beginning is truly things that he's been saying internally for years. Like, that is not These are not like this is not just some face he's putting on for the crowd, and like he really believes the things that he's saying there, and those things are the guiding principles that they've been developing Houdini with for years now. I mean, I don't know how long he's been in that position, but a long time now. But yeah, I think, we don't look at, everybody keeps saying substance designer. I'm sure there's other programs out there that do similar things. We don't look at that. We don't look at like, we need to get a new sculpt, our sculpt tool needs to be better. Let's try to take out ZBrush or something like that. Like that's never the conversation. Usually the conversation is more like our customers have asked for this. What can we do to make this better? Right. And that truly is the case. Like if you put in feedback to side effects, it's valuable. Believe me, we can't always work on it right away. I mean, how long have people been asking for new cops? It's been a while. But here it is. Like we did it. Like they've done it, and they're going to continue to improve on it. And when things need to change, and when we hear that feedback from our customers, that's what we're going to do. A lot of our customers ask for, hey, we'd like for more options to be able to do things in Houdini when we're working, on a simulation or something like that, and make edits in this way. Or when we're doing, layout in Solaris, we'd like to be able to control textures better or do things like those are the kind of feedback that we get. And we therefore then make the tools that we make. So I think that, yeah, exactly. If we were just copying, it would be, we just make alternatives things. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think this is a really exciting, product launch. It's so funny for me because like I have nothing, like I've said this a million times, I have nothing to do with the development of the software, but I get so nervous at every launch, honestly, because I'm like, I hope people like this. Like, I hope this is going to be like something cool for them. And also like watching the development, sometimes you're like, is this going to come together? I'm sure it will, but man, it's always like, I don't know, just like any project until it's the very last minute, you're like, oh man, there's still some questions. I still don't know. So, it's always interesting to watch from that standpoint as well. But, yeah, I think it's a really, it's a good release. It's really, I think it's really like there's a lot of great features, and I think it gives a good sense for where we're probably pointing in the future as far as a lot of these developments. Another thing too, a lot of people have been saying about the 0.5 releases, like they've been saying things like, man, a lot of these 0.5 releases feel like full releases. And it's, to be completely honest, I think the half releases are almost a way of just being able to say like, this isn't Houdini 32. You know what I mean? It's almost as much of a like, oh, this is just an update versus like, we don't want to be numbering into like triple digits sometime soon because of all the release cycles and stuff. But yeah, there's lots of reasons to, I mean, right now, let's think. I started learning on 15.5. So instead, we would be at Houdini 26 now if we were going by full numbers every time, I think is what currently we'd be at. So just trying to keep the numbers down maybe a little. Anyways, the release date is the month of July. That's the most I can say. There is a known internal date, but we're not just like winging it. But I think they've reserved the right to be able to move that a little bit if needed for quality assurance. I think right now internally there's a lot of testing and a lot of in there kind of working away at things to make sure it's as stable and solid as possible. So if anything, if anything game breaking pops its head up at the last, in the last, 11th hour, I think they like to make sure that there's no, they're not etching a date in stone for themselves unnecessarily, basically. That'd be my guess. I don't know that for sure, but July is the official date, and that is what I will reiterate. That is a really good question. I'm just gonna not hide my screen. I'm just gonna go back so it's just not this huge thing. Yeah, that's a great question. So, a couple things. You would probably need a really old computer to be able to run it, or I guess an emulator would work maybe. I know that Kim Davidson has old discs from Prisms. Yeah, Prisms. The original side effects software. That was the first one that I think they purchased that from Omnibus in 87, I want to say. But I know he has those discs. And he's shown some of those. I think he even has beta releases of Prisms that he has discs for still. I don't know about Houdini 1. I do know that the first film that used Houdini was a beta version of Houdini, and it was on Jingle All the Way. And that, I think, is the very first use of Houdini in a film. There's a scene where they I've seen that movie maybe once or twice in my life, but I'm pretty sure there's a scene where he's I don't know, it's Power Man or something. I don't know what it is, but he's in the suit and he's flying around, and he wraps around the flagpole. And I'm pretty sure that shot is the first use of Houdini in a movie. And it's such a weird and lame first movie. It's fine. It's nothing fantastic, but I'm pretty sure that's the first one. I'm sure Ian Fales over at Before and Afters has probably talked about some of those things before. So he's probably got way better in-depth information about those things. But JRV, you were asking, is everything or the majority of the stuff shown in the keynote going to be put up for learning? Now, that is something I can't definitively say anything to, because that is mainly handled by our marketing team and by folks that they have either contracted or worked with to have learning materials from. I know that. So two things. I do know, and I've heard it said multiple times, that a lot of the content from the release will be put into the content library for people to download and play with. That I know for a fact because I've heard multiple people from marketing mention that. Learning materials and courses, from that side of things, I'm not sure exactly what will and won't have in-depth courses and things like that. That's a good question. I'm sure most of it will have training materials around it. I know that marketing has a plan for that. I don't know to what extent and to what depth, but yes, those things, if you actually look at the comments on here, I think I can actually look them up. Let's see. Hello? Chat replay. Do we have a chat replay? There we go. Yeah, I'm not even going to be able to look through here, but if you go through and see Rob McGee or Chris Hebert talking here, they said multiple times in the chat here, yeah, the stuff's going to be online. It's going to be in the thing. So I know that they've been talking about that. There's a couple chat messages, kind of hard to go through them all, but anyways, Yeah, Rob is great. He's really good. The only thing I have a little struggle with Rob is that he's a Boston Bruins fan. I have a little trouble with that. But other than that, Rob's a great guy. Yeah, there'll probably be small videos talking about subjects. There'll be some that have larger courses. There'll be a lot of stuff out there. Yeah, Rob's a great teacher. His fundamentals, his foundations book and videos and things like that are just great for new learners. Really, really good. We're actually doing some curriculum, kind of packaging curriculum for professors and beginning teaching off people Houdini, and even we're starting to looking at secondary schools for Houdini, and we're using a lot of his material for that because it's like, well, we have a book for it. Like, we've written the book, so let's just use it. So we use that a lot to help as curriculum resources and things like that. So Rob's great. And super great guy to just chat with and stuff too. It was the first trip I had gone to with Side Effects was SIGGRAPH in 22 in Vancouver. And my wife came with me, and we kept bumping into Rob all morning when we were both looking for a place to eat breakfast, and we ended up eating at the same place. And it was actually like a donut shop, and it was really, really good. And we just sat outside and chatted for probably an hour about movies and books and TV shows that we liked and all sorts of different things. And it was really great. We always reference that whenever I, because there's a few Robs at Side Effects, whenever I'll say Rob, I always say, oh, Rob from, when we had that, the breakfast in Vancouver with, and she's like, oh yeah, Rob. Okay, great. But good dude, really great guy. All right. Well, I will be wrapping up soon, but I'm definitely open to more questions. So if you have more things that you're curious about with Houdini 20.5, happy to answer those questions. It seems like we're kind of winding down a little bit. The questions have come a little less fast and furious. Like the film series that was really poorly worded. But yeah, so I hope there's no final form either, but like everything will eventually have a final form. But I hope we're a long way away from that, to be honest. That's my hope, because I do just genuinely really, really, really enjoy working with Houdini. That's why I'm sitting here doing this for fun. That's why I've been doing this for years now. I can't even believe that. I don't think I say thank you enough to everybody here that join on these events and have joined in the past or watch after the fact. It's so crazy. Like I went on YouTube today and I switched over from my personal account to my Houdini Hangout account just so it's a little more official looking, I guess. And just to pull that down and see 3,250 subscribers, it's like nuts. Like, that's just crazy. I mean, it's not the reason I do this. I just do this because I like helping, like talking to people, and if we can all help each other, that's cool. It's just funny. Like, my private account is 126. Like, I don't know why anybody would subscribe to my private. It's literally nothing, but it's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, I just appreciate everybody being here and talking and chatting. And honestly, I wish there's a part of me that wishes that there's a way that I could have everybody on and like talk and chat and stuff like that. It's not super practical, but there's a part of me that's like, I'd love to do that. And like, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe like if I wasn't so darn lazy, maybe I should do like an IRL meetup at like a place or something. But usually I'm so busy when I go to events and stuff like that. There's like so many socials and stuff that I don't even get to go to anyways. So, and I'm way too introverted for that kind of stuff. But, anyways, cool. Well, everybody, yeah, Discord audio channel. It would just be like 20 people talking in my ears while I'm trying. I've thought about it. Believe me, I'm open to ideas. I'm always open to ideas, but Yeah, I just have to travel to all the hug events. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be easy. Just do that. Just be there. Well, there was one in Belgrade, I think, just go to Belgrade. Yeah, pretty crazy. I will be at SIGGRAPH in Denver. I'm actually volunteering this year with the Electronic Theater, which has been really cool. Got to help out with that a little bit, which is really cool. So speaking of in-person events, I will be there. So if anybody's there, you can always say hi. Everybody keeps joking that nobody's going to be there because it's in Denver and not LA or Vancouver, which I think is kind of a bummer because that kind of sucks. Like, I mean, I get it. I get that. Why do you need to go into an in-person conference for like a conference that could just as easily be virtual in a lot of ways? If I'm ever in Minneapolis, let you know. Yeah, I definitely will. I have been in Minneapolis, but 20 years ago. But yeah, it's cool. I actually really liked Minneapolis. So this is this will be a funny side note story that I don't know if I've ever really mentioned here. But maybe I have. But I used to play in a band a long time ago, and I used to tour around. And so we played. So that's why I've been to Minneapolis. But we actually, I want to say it was in Minneapolis because I think Prince is from Minneapolis, if I'm not mistaken, the artist that was known as Prince and then known as Prince later. I think we played in like his old club or something like that. And it was the trippiest place, man. There were like plants inside and like wishing wells and like, dude, it was crazy. That was, yeah. Okay. There we go. I was right. Yeah. Yeah. So, it was like his old club or something like that. And it was like a concert venue, and man, that was a wild place to play. It's like, man, that place has probably seen some things. But yeah, anyways, that's a little glimpse into my life 20 years ago was that. But yeah, anyways. I played bass in that band. And guitar. I play bass, guitar. I sing a little bit, which I don't. Yeah. Good luck finding it. I'm never going to put it online anywhere. So anyways, hey Jamal, you're back. Hi, welcome to the stream. Anyways, so yeah, there's a little side note story, but yes, I have been to Minneapolis. All right, well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this Houdini 20.5 launch day. Bass is underrated. Yeah, it's fun. I still have my that was the only thing I kept from all that time. I don't really play music that much anymore. It's kind of like a different part of my life, but I did keep my bass, and I really, really like my bass. It's really nice. But yeah, thank you guys all so much for joining us for Houdini 20.5 little release day. Not release day. Sorry, the keynote presentation premiere day. How about that? We use the word release too much internally, and it's like, it's always like, wait, release or when people can download it or when we show people the video, like what are we releasing? But yeah, thank you all so much for joining me today. Thanks for the questions and for everybody being here. And, yeah, I think the next couple weeks we'll have some just kind of back to normal streams. And whenever Houdini decides to release, we'll probably have something fun, 20.5 actual get in there and play around with stuff. And then later in July, I'll have to be away for a little bit because I'm going to be in Denver. So, yeah, that's the upcoming weeks and plans and things like that. So thanks everybody for joining. And yeah, go maybe rewatch the launch video. There's lots of fun stuff in there. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time. Bye.